Good morning. I want to thank you all for being here today. And I want to welcome you to our legislative panel, part of our Get to Know Your Government and Community Leaders series. A big thank you to the town of Ellettsville for letting us use this wonderful space. We're grateful to our presenting sponsor, Indiana University, for their support. And in just a moment, I'll invite Zachary Smith-Howard to introduce our moderator and our panelists. We also want to recognize our gold sponsors for today's event: Cook Medical, Duke Energy, Farm Bureau Co-op, and People's State Bank. We truly appreciate your support. A special thanks to our premium partners who support the Chamber at the highest level, and you'll see their logos on our slideshow. And if our panelists would like to take their seats up at the front here. Please mark your calendars for our Coffee Connection, sponsored by Smithville, on March 25th at the Edgewood Coffee Corral, and our Golf Scramble on May 13th. For details and registration, sponsorship information, please visit our website. Now I'm pleased to welcome Zachary Smith-Howard, Assistant Director of State Relations at Indiana University, to the podium. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Again, Zach Smith-Howard, Director of State Relations for IU, on behalf of Pamela Witten, President of Indiana University, and Vice President Michael Huber for University Relations. We just want to bring greetings, and we're grateful to sponsor today's event and get to introduce our moderator and our fantastic legislators. So our moderator tonight, this morning, is Colin McCarthy. He's the Executive Vice President and fifth-generation owner of Smithville Communications. With over 20 years of industry experience, Colin advocates for expanding high-quality broadband access, especially in rural U.S. communities. He collaborates with Congress and policymakers on broadband policies and serves on the Government Affairs Committee of the Indiana Broadband and Technology Association. Locally, he supports economic development through the Monroe County Redevelopment Commission. Please welcome Colin here in a second, but I get a chance to introduce our area legislators. We'll start with Representative Peggy Mayfield, who serves Indiana House District 60, which covers portions of Johnson, Morgan, and Monroe counties. Representative Mayfield was first elected to District 60 in 2012. She is the Vice Chair of the House Public Policy Committee and serves on the House Insurance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee. I believe Representative Matt Pierce is going to be joining us virtually. Representative Pierce serves Indiana House District 61, which covers parts of Monroe County. Representative Pierce has held the District 61 seat since 2002. He is the Assistant Democratic Floor Leader and the ranking minority member of the Indiana House Utilities Committee. He also serves on the following committees: Courts and Criminal Codes, Elections Apportionment, Rules and Legislative Procedures, and the Statutory Committee on Ethics. Our next legislator in person is Representative Dave Hall, who represents House District 62, which includes all of Brown County and portions of Monroe and Jackson County. Representative Hall was first elected to the Indiana House District 62 seat in 2022. Representative Hall serves as Assistant Majority Whip, Vice Chair of Utilities, Energy, and Telecommunications Committee, and a member of the Local Government Committee and Natural Resources Committee. Welcome, Rep. Hall. Senator Shelley Yoder represents Senate District 40, which includes the majority of Monroe County. She serves as the Senate Minority Leader, ranking minority member of the Environmental Affairs Committee, and minority member of the following committees: Education and Career Development, Health and Provider Services, Joint Rules, Rules and Legislative Procedure, and we want to welcome Senator Yoder. And then finally, Representative Bob Heaton represents House District 46, first elected to the House in 2010. Representative Heaton serves as Majority Whip and on the Ways and Means Committee. He serves as the Higher Education Subcommittee Chair and the Financial and Institutions Committee. Representative Heaton represents all of Owen County and portions of Clay, Monroe, and Vigo counties. Please welcome Cullen and our legislators.
All right, thank you very much. Let me get this situated a little bit here. How's everybody doing down on Matthews Drive? Seems like way far away. Way up there, that's fine. All right. It's a very busy session, and I think that's the interest here this morning. So we're so glad that you all came, and a lot of things going on. So we want to first touch on your priority legislation, and if you'd give us an update. So what is your personal priority coming into the session, and what is the status of that bill? So if you had a priority bill, what would that be? So Dave, we'll start with you.
I've got several. One of my top priorities was ending involuntary annexation. I drafted a bill, made it through committee with a few amendments, made it through second reading with no amendments, and then it was on third reading. And I think that this bill has been attempted so many times that people have just kind of fallen asleep at the wheel on giving input. So when it made it to third reading, I think there were a lot of people that were kind of caught off guard that it was actually moving through the House. So it got a lot of attention, and there were a few issues that I wanted to make sure I addressed. And I was going to be the sponsor of a Senate bill that was basically the same bill, and I didn't want to send it back to second reading to make amendments that late in the first half. So I decided to just pull that bill off the calendar and work on the Senate bill that's coming over. So I've met with like Gretchen Gutman from Cook, Farm Bureau, AIC, AIM, several stakeholders in that conversation, and I think I'm getting closer to an amendment to where maybe everybody doesn't hate the bill and they just dislike it somewhat. So I think that's, you got a good bill when nobody really likes it that much, but they don't hate it anymore. So I'm excited to see that move along this session. And if I can't get it to a place where we can vote it out, I'll definitely be working on that next year again. I had another bill that would require research animals to be adopted once that research is complete. That moved out of the House. It's in the Senate now. I've got a few amendments on that bill to make it better. It's kind of, there were three groups in the state that do animal research, and I met with all three of them. And one didn't like it, one was kind of indifferent, and the other one liked it a lot. So I feel like we're kind of in that Goldilocks zone again, where I think we've got a good bill to go forward. I think that'll hopefully move in the Senate. And I had a bill, I get all of Brown County in my district, and the Brown County State Park takes up a big chunk of the land in Brown County, and then you've got federal forest there, church camps, and when you take all the ground that's tax exempt in Brown County, it's over half the county that doesn't collect any property tax revenue. And that's difficult for the county with 15,000 people to serve. When those parks and Airbnbs and cabins fill up, it's close to 60, 70,000 people are the estimates I've heard. And that puts a strain on the public safety resources that they have there in Brown County. So I had a bill that would require, or would allow a county to implement a $1 gate fee if they have a state park or state recreation area in their county, to collect that for public safety or for water quality improvements. So in Monroe County at the Fairfax and Paintown, they could collect $1 there and use that money to help improve water quality. At Brown County, it would be primarily they would use it for public safety. And I think Brown County, it would generate between $100,000 and $120,000 a year. And this, if you buy an annual pass, you're exempt from paying that $1 gate fee. We're not going to shake you down for $1 when you come in. But if you're going to stop and pay anyway, that's where they would add that extra $1 fee on. And I think it was somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000, I think, a year for Monroe County if they would implement that fee. So that moved out of the House, and that's in the Senate now. I haven't got a hearing scheduled for that yet, but I'm looking forward to moving that legislation along as well. And then last session, I had a bill that would, or a resolution that would urge Congress to set term limits on themselves. So that made it through the House last year, and that's like 87% favorable, I think, amongst Hoosier voters. And I thought, oh, this will be a cakewalk. And I got to the State House, and there's a different perspective from politicians on term limits than there are people in the public. So it was not the most popular bill that I've carried in the State House, but made it through the House and got to the Senate. And it was a unique experience. Usually, if a committee chair is going to hear a bill, you typically would have the votes to move that bill if you're going to vote on it. And that bill went down in flames in the Senate Judiciary Committee last year. So Eric Cook was texting me as I was presenting the bill, and he said, "I don't think you've got the votes to move this bill." And I said, "Well, we're kind of in it now. Like, we just got to run it out." So I told him, I said, "Well, if I lose this next election, I'll be able to check a box that I had a pretty unique story to have a bill go down in flames in the Senate Judiciary." But so that bill started in the Senate this year. It's made it through the Senate this time, and I've got that in a committee hearing on Monday. So I'm looking forward to that fight again. But we'll be the 11th state, and that resolution would call Congress to set term limits on themselves. And you have to have 2/3 of the states pass a resolution worded, towards that topic in order to call an Article 5 convention. The chances of a convention actually being called are very low. Typically, Congress would see the pressure building, and they would just decide to set those term limits themselves. So I'm excited to see that one move on. But that's all I've worked on personally this year, but excited to have that list this year.
Good list.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Peggy.
Good morning. This is my first time at the Ellettsville Chamber. I don't usually do 7:30 a.m. events, so good for all of you. And I know I was invited here specifically for the Ellettsville food and beverage tax, which I will talk about later. When we talk about, personal priorities, there are a lot of legislators who specialize. This person does education, this person does taxes, this person does public safety. I'm not one of those people. I'm one of those people who people come to and say, "This happened to me. I think there ought to be a law that does X." So I get these weird one-offs of legislation, and that's the majority of the bills that I've had passed over my career, is what people have brought to me. So this year, one of those is, and it's still, it did not get a hearing. I'm still hoping for an opportunity in the Senate. I'm working with some of those folks. But about title deed fraud, and even in the time that I have been working on this since the summer, it has grown, and I'm getting more and more feedback on instances where title deed fraud, if you've seen it late night, it's like LifeLock for your home. Your house might be sold out from underneath you and you've never known it, and then all of a sudden someone's moving in, or you're being evicted, or you might not find out for years. And the target audience for this is the elderly, and that's usually from a relative who's getting their home, or organized crime overseas, where they're just hitting AI or the internet, just throwing so many documents, and most of them are forged. Now that we take electronic notaries, they can't always be verified, and they're forged. And the people who the targets are, you don't have a mortgage, so there's no bank to be notified. You have high equity in your home, because all these criminals want to do is sell your home. They don't want your home, they just want the money, and that money's going offshore somewhere. The victims are the homeowner, clearly, but there is case law on their side that they can get their property back. The real victim is the unsuspecting buyer who just spent all that money, and they will never get it back, because you'll never find out who did this. So NCOIL is a National Council of Insurance Legislators. We're looking at some model legislation to introduce nationwide to help people. There's two ways to go about it. You can have criminal penalties if you can catch the person, or you can have civil remedies where you allow, like, an attorney general to put that home back into the rightful owner's names just by quiet title. And that's the route that I was taking. So that's still one of my priorities, and we will bring it up again next year if I don't get it through this year. When I say I get all the one-offs, I have a bill on collaborative distilling. So if you don't drink, or if you're not in the alcohol industry, you really don't care. But it's about equalizing the regulations for the wine industry. Already has this opportunity where you can work with other winemakers, and the breweries have it, but the distillers don't. So we're just trying to even up that playing field. I'm trying to think of what the other one was that got a hearing besides the tax. As Dave got his Brown County bill amended into mine, so now I have to do all of his work. I pulled the same trick on a freshman legislator, and my bill about public works projects got amended into his bill on public works projects, and he's doing a phenomenal job. But it's about the thresholds for public works projects, and mine was specifically for airports. I know you have the airport down here. You had to get all kinds of bids if you went beyond $150,000, and there were time limits if there was federal money involved. And if you're not involved in aviation or airports, you really don't care. But you can't turn a shovel of dirt on the footprint of an airport for $150,000 anymore. So we're raising that threshold so they can get to the work right away. We're extending the time if you're using federal money to be able to use in that bid because the feds are so slow. We were losing opportunities, and 95% of our aviation infrastructure is funded by the federal government. So those are the types of things. I mean, we talk about equine teeth floating because we have to. Nobody else cares about it, but we have $1 billion horse industry in Indiana. So it matters to someone if you ruin $1 million horse's teeth. So we spend a lot of time talking about some of the oddest things because we need to. So thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here and excited to talk about a few things. I know SB 1, which is the property tax relief bill, is on everyone's mind, and 518, which requires more schools to share less funding, is on your mind as well. So I'm sure we'll get to those. I'm going to put those because those are priorities, not necessarily to pass, but to make sure that they're amended so they don't harm our local communities and schools. But I will say there are a few priority bills that are still moving through. Like Representative Mayfield, I had several conversations over the course of when we were not in session. My first one happened, I visited a long-term health facility in Bloomington, and during that conversation, their executive director said, "Is there anything you could do that could help our students who are working through the Pathways program to earn their LPN licensure? Could you help them? Because currently we have language in the Indiana code that requires them to retake all of those same courses that they would take during high school, because the way that the code is written, it says that in order to receive your LPN license, your classwork has to start after the age of 18 and after you receive your high school diploma." And I thought, we can fix this. So I worked with all the stakeholders, from Ivy Techs to our nurses, to Nurses Association, to our professional licensing agency, to figure out how we can write this bill in a way that helps students. I had another conversation with a mom about this very thing, saying, "I'm a single mom, my daughter wants to go into the healthcare field, and can you help her figure out a way to earn an income that could help pay for school?" And my 176 came out of that. It got a hearing in health on the Senate side, got out of health unanimously, got out of the Senate unanimously, is now over in the House, and I think Senate Bill 176 is going to get a hearing. I was able to get the chair of the Health Committee on the House side to be a sponsor, and the chair of the Education Committee on the House side to be the sponsor. So it's both a health care bill and an education bill, and we're going to get it right, and I'm excited about that bill. Another bill that I worked on based on a conversation I had in district during some of the town halls I had during the interim was a conversation I had with a police officer who serves in a sex crimes unit for the state of Indiana. And he said, "Shelley, is there anything that you can do? We have this archaic phrase that we use, and some states are changing that phrase because the phrase itself is actually re-traumatizing. It victimizes the survivor, and it frames the whole crime in an adult framework, and that is the phrase child pornography. That is the wrong way to talk about this crime. And we should change that phrase in Indiana code to reflect what it is, and that is a child sex abuse crime. So it changes all wherever you see in Indiana code child pornography, it will be called child sex abuse material. Trying to get us to think about these crimes in the way that they actually are. It is sex abuse. And so that bill, I worked with Senator Freeman, who is the chair of corrections, he and I are working on this bill. It got out of corrections, it got out of the Senate, it's now in the House, and we're working to make sure it gets a hearing. So that bill is still working its way through, but looks good. It's Senate Bill 326. Another bill that I worked as a co-author alongside Senator Charbonneau is a child care bill. And Senator Charbonneau, who is the chair of health in the Senate, and I'm actually the ranking minority member in health, he and I have worked on child care bills. Of course, I've been pushing like a comprehensive change, but we're just going to fix it with a little scalpel here and there. But this bill would allow us to look at neighboring states, not to be annexing them into Indiana, but rather to say, what in your licensed child care facilities, all those that are licensed, what is your child to care provider ratio? And can we learn and be a little bit more nimble from our neighboring states? How this is different, when you're licensed, you are heavily regulated in the child care space. So we want to learn what's Illinois doing, what's Kentucky doing, what's Michigan doing, what's Ohio doing, and could we expand that ratio in a way that does not harm children and still provides excellent quality care, but permits more children to be able to be served, more families to be served in Indiana, because we have a child care issue. That bill made it through the Health, made it through the Senate. It is now in the House and has a hearing set. That's Senate Bill 463. That is a priority for me. And with that, I'll just be quiet and excited to take your questions. But there are some things that are very concerning, and we'll get to that. But those are some real bright stars in serving you, listening to you, and working on those bills through this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for being here. You might be able to hear me, but can you see me way back there? You know, okay. Well, yeah, this is my 15th year of being in the General Assembly. And when I came in, got voted in on November 2nd of 2010. So my first session was, my first 2 years was Mitch Daniels' last 2 years. And you talk about doing heavy lifting those his last 2 years, my first 2 years. We dealt with education reform and then right to work and so forth. But one of my first town halls was in Owen County in Spencer. And Representative Jim Baird from Putnam County was elected same time I was, and now he's in Congress, as you may know. And so we're there, and they asked about some bills, and I said, well, I have 3 bills, and I went through them and so forth, and there's probably about 30 people there, and they asked Representative Jim Baird, Representative Baird, how many bills you got? You're presenting this year. And he says, well, I'm not doing any because I think we got too many bills on the, too many laws on the books now, and I think we've got too many. So, and everybody stood up and, yeah, you're right. But, so obviously I never forgot that. But speaking of bills, we have, I think we had 179 bills that passed out of the first half, and 168 of them was bipartisan. And so just less than 10% is partisan bills that we passed. But, and some of them will not make it to the end, but but a few of them will. And we talked about Senate Bill 518 and Senate Bill 1, and Peggy and I were in Ways and Means for 9 hours on Wednesday. We talked about those two bills, and a lot of emotions there with property taxes and also with charter schools and so forth, as far as the funding with property taxes as well. But Senate Bill 1, it's going to be some big changes in the next few weeks pertaining to that. And as I've talked to some of you already this morning, there's a fine line there when you're talking about police and fire and so forth, and school funding as well, and that type of thing. So it's a process, and as I've told people, probably the last 2.5, 3 weeks of session is when it will really start as far as the workings behind the scenes. And so we'll see how that goes. One thing I am looking at, I've talked with the Department of Natural Resources new director, Alan Morrison, about McCormick's Creek and the campground over there. About 2 years ago, in late March of 2023, we had that tornado, and it just destroyed the campground there. And so at that time, we put $5 million in the budget a couple years ago, and to clean that up. And now in the budget, so far, there's $27.72 million in our 1001, House Bill 1001. And so hopefully that'll stay in there. And talking to the director there at Alan Morrison, we talked about it, and he said there may be a little bit of changes there and so forth, but hopefully not too much. But that's, as I'm sure most of you know, that's a fabulous state park, and quite a bit of damage was done back then. But so we'll see how that goes. So another thing this past that kind of got some attention, at least back in Vigo County, was township government bill. Representative Karen Engelman had a bill, House Bill 1233, and it dealt with really eliminating township government. And some people like that and some people don't, but it did not get a hearing, and I don't know what the future holds with that. But about 6-7 years ago, we had a vote on eliminating township advisory boards, and I think the vote was 17 yeses and 74 noes. So I remember Speaker Bosma at the time says, well, we're not going to deal with township government in a long time. So, but it's always out there, and when we talk about property taxes and that type of thing, and local government, that might be discussed in the future, who knows? But we'll see where that goes. And so I did have one bill that dealt with the Vigo County courts, and they were looking to add a magistrate there, and they've been after having a new court for years, but we went with a new magistrate there. So, and that was amended into Representative Chris Jeter's bill, and so I think that's going to go through. And they need all the help they can in Vigo County and the court system there with that magistrate. So anyway, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it, and looking forward to having the feedback that we're going to have today. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have on Zoom today Matt Pierce from District 61. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. First, I should check. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, that's good to know. The sound coming from your room is a little bit up and down, but I can mostly understand everything, so that's good. Thanks for letting me kind of appear remotely. My day job is teaching at Indiana University, and my first class this morning starts at 9 a.m., so I'm going to have to leave about 8:45 to get in the classroom and get set up. Today, I'm actually going to take the students on a field trip to the Wells Library and show them these things called books, and these physical things you can hold that have words printed on them. So that's going to be our exciting adventure today. So as far as legislation I've been working on, I had a bill passed the House that's now over in the Senate that deals with things called signal jammers, which I had not really heard about until this summer when I was serving on the Corrections and Criminal Code Study Committee. We had testimony from the Vanderburgh County Sheriff about a situation where there was a burglary or something in process, and the sheriffs rolled up on the scene, and suddenly none of their communications would work, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And they finally discovered that the perpetrators had this thing called a signal jammer, which you can actually buy on the internet. Now, all this stuff is illegal under federal law, But of course, you have to get U.S. attorneys and the Justice Department and the Federal Communications Commission all involved to try to do some kind of prosecution. So you can imagine the situation. So much stuff is wireless now that somebody pulls up, to commit a crime. If they can blank out your wireless surveillance camera, your cell phone, the police communication when they arrive, I mean, that's a really dangerous, serious problem. And so what my bill does is essentially mirror the federal law and put it into state law, which will then allow our local prosecutors to prosecute the use of those devices and the possession of them as well. And it's just important to get those things out of the hands of people who might be using them nefariously. And the bill also allows the equipment to be seized so it doesn't get used in some other kind of crime as well. So that's over in the Senate. They passed a similar bill over to the House, so we'll see which one the powers to be decide to move on down to the governor. And then the another bill which I'm excited about that I joined Representative Soliday as a co-sponsor on is Senator Cook's bill from the Senate, which deals with increasing the capacities of electric transmission lines with the use of new technologies. So people might not realize it, but there is all kinds of electric generation projects waiting to get onto the grid. We really have like 3 or 4 times the amount of electricity trying to get onto the grid as we actually need at this point. And because we have talk of a lot of new artificial intelligence data centers and things that will need a lot of energy, this is a big focus. And so the question is, how can you unclog the transmission system and get more of these projects online? Well, one thing that has to be done is we have to build more transmission lines, but those take about 10 years to get through the process. It's very difficult to site those and get them built. But there is technology in which you can essentially use software and hardware and monitoring and things to be able to carry more electricity on existing lines, or maybe just restring existing transmission lines with new and better conductors. So Senator Cook's bill, which I've joined Representative Soliday on in the House, essentially creates some incentives for utilities to look at that more carefully, and also has the Utility Commission study how those could improve the situation of trying to get more generation onto the grid. And so I'm excited to be on that bill as well.
Okay. All right, Matt, thank you very much, and good luck with your archaeological expedition this morning at the library. Okay, let's get right to it. We do have a couple of bills of interest. Let's go with the first one of local interest for the Chamber and the town of Ellettsville. And we've both been supportive on HB 1080, and that's the food and beverage tax for Ellettsville and the use of transit for those dollars. So, Peggy, since you're on Ways and Means and have seen the bill change over time, do you want to give a little background or see where we are currently on House Bill 1080?
I guess maybe touching a little bit on the history of the Monroe County food and beverage taxes might be in order. And so back in 2009, the General Assembly, and that was before I was in it, put in their budget the enabling legislation for Monroe County to adopt a 1% food and beverage tax. After it was passed in the budget, you have to pass a local ordinance to implement it. Well, that didn't happen until 2017. If you remember, the economy was not great through the 2009, 2010. So in 2017, Monroe County passed it, and so they've been collecting it since 2018, always with that view of splitting it between the city of Bloomington. I guess I should say, was it always with the view of splitting it between Bloomington and the county? There was that plan had not developed. So when the tax was passed, there wasn't a firm, concrete plan for what to do with the money. And this is the first time, I should say, that a food and beverage tax has been modified after it's been implemented, and the only way that that was able to happen is because that money had never been committed to anything. I would never pursue something where it would take something from an obligation that was already established. So and in 2009 to 2017, Ellettsville was still relatively small in relation to the rest of Monroe County. But it has grown tremendously. It's one of the fastest growing areas in your county. So they came to me and said, our restaurants, we're generating a significant portion of the county's portion of the tax. So it was divided out that 90% of the food and beverage tax collected in the county would go to the city of Bloomington for their project, which is the convention center. I am not touching that in any way, shape, or form. That is their plan. They are moving forward with it. That remaining 10% is the county, which includes Ellettsville, and they are contributing a significant amount. They're really the largest municipality that is part of the county. So their question was, is it fair for us to have our own, we're generating the tax, can't we use it for what we need? We don't have a seat at the table for what it's going to be used for. And that is why this legislation came about. And the place where we landed and where it is right now, and I'm only going to talk to the Ellettsville portion. There's other innkeeper's taxes and other places that have food and beverage that got stuck in this bill. Thank you, Dave. It was about, what can Ellettsville use? Now, additional background is since then, this transit issue has arisen because Ellettsville was no longer considered a rural area. It became an urban area, and the federal dollars that were helping with the transportation were no longer available. You can't have urban to urban points of travel using those federal dollars. So they needed to, the county wanted them to kick in on their portion of the transit expenses. They had no way to raise revenue to do that. And that's where this food and beverage tax comes in. So it is also the first time I think a food and beverage tax has ever been used for transit. And we are going to limit it to transit for now, and it might change a little bit in the Senate, but the focus is this is going to be used to generate the funds to provide for transit for however they choose, whether that is a point-to-point, whether it is a fixed route, whether it is vouchers for, Ubers, that is up to the locality. But it's only can be used for transit. And hopefully that will relieve some of those pressures. I had the support, Representative Pierce helped me walk through trying to make sure that we are trying to be as fair as we can. I did not want to hurt the county either, but since they don't have a concrete plan yet, we didn't know what we were going to be hurting if there was anything. So it's a 50-50 split. Whatever comes to the county, even though Ellettsville is generating more of that tax than 50%, we figured that as Ellettsville's food and beverage grows, that will also help the county, which was the original intent. So Ellettsville will get 50% for transit, and if we add on other infrastructure is yet to be determined, the county gets 50% for whatever project that they come up with. And I just was informed that I have a hearing Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock on the bill. So this is going to continue moving forward through the Senate.
Side tip, I was informed the mics get hot, and that's why they snap and crackle. So don't be afraid to kind of pull back from it a little bit. That way they can keep the sound consistent. So thank you very much for that information. Good to know that the ball's still rolling. So that's great. Let's move along to SB1. We'll get to questions here in a minute, but let's get along to SB1, the big one, if you will. On property taxes. So who would like to to start that? Shelley raised her hand. So we're going to go with Senator Yoder.
There is a reputation I have in my family that if there's anything dangerous happening, everyone looks at me. You go first, Mom. Why do you put yourself into these situations? I would say Senate Bill 1 was in response to frustrations that Hoosiers had when they would see their property tax bill. So that's how we got here. And I don't know, because I think many people ran on this. The governor ran on this, that we are going to do something with property taxes. And Hoosiers felt excited that they were going to get some relief. And I would say if wages were keeping up and cost of living was keeping up in Indiana, Hoosiers wouldn't feel so desperate. Because the reality is our property taxes are on the low end compared to every other state in the country. But Hoosiers are feeling it because they're having to pay for more with less. And even the governor in his State of the State said, the reality is, and it wasn't about SB1, he was just making in his speech, Hoosier wages have not kept up. Our incomes have not kept up with the cost of living. So that's where we are. Senate Bill 1 was hoping to address this need for relief for Hoosiers. The concern is it's shifting the burden to our local communities, who will most definitely have to raise taxes to make up for the lost revenue that comes from property taxes. Because that's where property taxes are then used by our local governments, our local units, to fund police departments, fire, our schools, everything local. And this was a serious reduction. And I have a handout. Please take one, because it's all fancy, and it gives some bullet points. It's back on the back table, but it does sort of give some highlights where the bill was amended and how it got out of the Senate. It was amended and now it was heard for testimony only on the House side, and as Representative Heaton said, it was 9 hours. And there was, for Senate Bill 1, almost 95% in opposition. And I think there was one person there, one entity there in support. But where it now stands, what they're saying, because the fiscal on it is, there isn't really a fiscal. We don't know the actual impact that this is going to have on local government, on local units. So the fiscal note was light, but what they are computing is it could deliver, on average, a $48 relief to Hoosiers. And yet, the impact of that loss is going to be felt so much more drastically than that $48 average. It's going to probably lead to a need to raise income taxes at a local level to make up for that difference. And it's going to very much harm. We had some counties saying that 80% of their budget goes to just fund police, just their police departments. So I'm really concerned about SB1. I don't know if this person is in this room. I did get a letter from an Ellettsville resident saying, please support Senate Bill 1 and do the right thing for Ellettsville. And that is out there because of what I said originally, that people are just having a tough time making ends meet. And this feels and looks and is presented in a way that would kind of give this sense of relief. But when you get down into it, it's just a shell game of shifting burden and could end up costing Hoosiers more. So I'm concerned about Senate Bill 1. And with that, I don't know if that's a good sort of outlook, but we could go from there. It's a starting place.
We'll start from there, and I've got one question, and then we'll transition here to Q&A. So the rest of you three, from the House perspective, what are you hearing from local governments? We have several counties here at the table throughout South Central Indiana represented. So what are they telling you in terms of an impact that they think could happen? So, Bob, do you want to? Yeah.
Sure. When it comes to property taxes, I'm really not hearing a lot about that. Maybe check back with me tomorrow at noon after our town hall in Terre Haute. It may be different, but But it's, you know, and Speaker Todd Houston mentioned a few times in the last few years that property taxes are a local tax. The state of Indiana doesn't collect 1 penny, okay? So, and I've got farmer friends, my district's basically rural, and a pretty big farmer recently mentioned to me that he farms in Clay County and also Vigo County, and it's same dirt, and it's right on the county line. But Clay County, the taxes are about 1/3 of what Vigo County is when it comes to property taxes. And that's so true. So it's kind of, and Senator Yoder is right. It's a fine line there between, you know, police and fire and schools and so forth, but libraries. But we got to work something out, and I think we'll get into it more next week, next Wednesday. And I think Chairman Jeff Thompson talked about to us, and he put it out there on Wednesday, that House Bill, I think 1402, will probably be amended into Senate Bill 1, and that deals with business personal property taxes and so forth. But that bill in and of itself is 288 pages. So this bill in the next 6-7 weeks is really going to really increase in the number of pages and what's in it. So we'll have to see where it goes. But and then there's other bills to deal with. But that's probably the big one right now that we're looking at as far as the property tax issue.
Dave, I haven't gotten to you for a little bit. So what are you hearing locally on the property tax issue?
Before I was elected to be House District 62 state rep, I was the president of the Jackson County Council, and I was on the council for almost 6 years. And post-COVID, inflation had risen a lot, and it was tough to keep good employees. So most of our budget, we did a lot of cutting and tried to just really focus in on paying good employees to retain them. And I can't speak for every local government budget, but a substantial cut to, I know the Jackson County budget would mainly be people. So you'd be laying people off or reducing, sheriff's department, highway workers, jail staff. And I think when I knocked on doors, I would knock on a door that someone had lived in Indiana for quite a few years. They had seen these increases, but when you look at our across the country, our property taxes, I think we're 5th in the nation for property taxes. So every once in a while I would get a door where somebody would move here from Texas or Illinois or some other state with higher property tax, and they would be ecstatic about the property tax that they paid. And I thought, this is great. I'll tell the next house I knock on that complains about property taxes. And that was a horrible idea. They don't care what other states are doing. So, I think there's going to be, where we started and where we're at now and where we end up, I think are all going to be very different pictures. And I think there's a balance that we have to find to offer relief to people because, they need it. Like what Senator Yoder said, there are people struggling, and we have to balance that with schools and local governments that receive this property tax money. So I think there's a place we'll land. 'Cause similar to what I said earlier, I've heard there's a rep that's kind of been a mentor to me at the State House, and he uses you don't always get it your way. This is not Arby's. So I think we're going to find a bill again that maybe not everybody loves, but it offers some relief across the board. But yeah, I've not heard a lot, honestly. Like when I was door knocking, it was a topic, but it wasn't it wasn't the pressing issue at every single door when I was out knocking. But most people, when you just show up and surprise them, they don't really have a lot of time to think. So usually they're like, "No, I'm good," just to get me to go away. So it's not like an accurate poll to say that it's not on the top of everybody's mind. But when you just knock on their door, they don't always have that ready to fire. But yeah, that's my experience from local government, and hopefully we end up in a good spot with this bill.
Okay, good. Well, for the sake of time, let's go ahead and open it up to the public if you want to continue on that conversation. So Jen Pearl, I saw your hand first.
Good morning, and thank you so much. This is a really helpful update. The Indiana Capitol Chronicle recently reported that 44% of Indiana's state budget comes from the federal government, and like half of that goes to Medicaid. Could you please talk about how changes at the federal level are impacting all of the conversations around budget and everything else at the state level?
We're being very cautious. Like everybody else, if we don't know that the money's coming, it's hard to appropriate money. And there are some certain things, like Department of Homeland Security is almost 100% funded by feds. A significant portion of Medicaid. I'm trying to think, there's one other department that is workforce development, unemployment is almost entirely funded by federal dollars. So we're trying to create a very conservative budget that we can pivot on if needed. It's a very challenging time, and we won't know until the last minute what's going to happen. It's changing daily in DC, so hopefully it'll be a little bit more settled down by the end of April.
Okay. Eric?
Thank you, legislators. Regarding Senate Bill 1, how does the property tax relief, so here in Monroe County, as you all know, we have a lot of our workforce that rents, the renters. How does Senate Bill 1's property tax relief translate to relief for renters?
I can take that because it doesn't. We tried to get it amended in the Senate on the floor, and I would encourage my colleagues to do the same. On average in Indiana, we have a 30% renter base. I mean, 30% of individuals and families rent. In Monroe County, that percentage is much higher. And we tried to get a tax break for renters, reasonable, conservative, but if we're talking about providing relief, all people, individuals need to see that relief. And so it was defeated. It was not, we offered it, it wasn't put into the bill, so right now there is no relief. And I want to just throw this in here. Senate Bill 1, the conversation around Senate Bill 1 almost needs to happen alongside Senate Bill 518. They pretty much go hand in hand, and we can get to that in a second, but right now there's nothing in the bill. And if we're going to continue moving Senate Bill 1, I don't know what's going to happen. I hope that there is something in there to speak to giving relief to our renters in the state.
Hi, I'm Kyle Hannon. I belong to a regional trail group and also the Indiana Greenways Foundation. So Indiana is actually currently the envy of the nation because of our trail system. It started with Governor Daniels with the regional trail system. It expanded under Governor Pence with the regional cities program, and then went crazy, went in a good way, under Governor Holcomb with the Next Level Trails program. Put $180 million into trail development, including what's going on right outside this window. So we're really kind of the envy of the nation. People say, man, how do you do this? How do you do this? And we put the resources into it. And the trail development in Indiana is great for health, for recreation, for economic development. And currently, trail projects, 0. So let's not go to 0. And I understand all the budget needs in there, in this, that you're facing, and we have to do this. But let's not go to 0. Can we find some way to put some money for trail development to try to keep the momentum going? That's my question.
I guess it's really a matter of wants and needs, and we have to prioritize. And there's a gazillion great ideas. There's just not money to fund a gazillion great ideas. So if we have to pause that, if it's 0 this year, this biennium, then it's 0 this biennium. And I don't know where that's going to land. If it's for 4 years, it's for 4 years. It depends on the health of the state's budget when we can, prioritize that particular item again.
William?
I was going to say,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, Kyle mentioned that to me earlier, and I appreciate that. But I've got a commissioner back home, Mike Morris, and Mike, he's probably 73, 74, and still runs and bikes and and that's a great thing. And he indicated to me like a month ago, he said, Bob, there's no money in the budget pertaining to trails. And he says, we need $1 million to complete our trails and that type of thing. I said, Mike, I'm with you. You got to find the money. And I told him where to find the money locally, but it's kind of, we'll just have to continue to work on that. I'm always, I didn't realize Indiana was #1 as far as trails and building of trails and so forth. I mean, we vacationed for years out in Colorado. It seemed like they got trails everywhere. Of course, they spent that money, invested that money years ago and so forth. And I think it's just it's a good quality of life issue, personally. That's just me. But we're trying to do some more expansion in Vigo County, and seems like Clay County hasn't got involved in that yet. But it varies from different counties and different regions of the state. So I hear your pain, and so it's on my radar, and we'll see what we can do in the next few weeks.
As a member of the Trails Caucus, Kyle always providing good leadership there. I would say this will be an amendment that we will offer on the Senate side. In conversations that I've had with the governor, he is eager to support preventative medicine measures to save on our spending when it comes to health care. And trails are preventative in nature. So that is our argument. And if we can get just some money to, it would be more of a gesture of, this is a value that we have in Indiana. Are we going to fund all of the projects? No. But could we at least say it still remains something that we value in the state of Indiana, and with that, we're going to put some money behind this, because there's still some administrative costs that we want to maintain and help communities work together to not just have a trail, but to connect our trails. And that will be sort of our focus on the Senate Democrat side.
One of the, in talking about SB1, have there been any conversations about caps on reassessments and evaluating reassessments compared to new assessments? Because one of the problems in a local town, we could grow 20, 30%, but we're capped at a 4% AD growth for this year. But if you would have a cap for taxpayers for reassessments, and let us capture all new growth, as in true new construction, that would solve both the problems, because you would get rewarded for growing. Our taxpayers are saying they're taxed too much. What I've drilled down, what they're really saying, are year-to-year increases are too much, because local officials have got them convinced it's assessments is causing the problem, when it's not. It's our tax rates based on assessments. So is there any talk to separate the assessments? Because it's the reassessments that's causing problems. New construction is still going to come here, because you guys are right. Our tax rates are low. I mean, we really have lower taxes compared to these other states. But our existing residents need some relief from year-to-year increases, and separating that would do that.
I think one of the challenges is we have a levy-based system with a rate-based constraint. And where do we need to tie those together? Is assessment the right index to tie that to? So all of this is on the table. And even in this room, I see local government, I see homeowners, I see businesses. So I see, the 1%, the 2%, and the 3% group in here. And if I touch one of you, it's going to affect the other. It used to be that the property tax pie was about a third, divided between the 1%, 2%, and 3%. Now I've heard anywhere from 44% to 52% is homeowners. So it's disproportionately put back on the homeowners' backs. Part of that is because your houses turn over more often. You don't sell corporate land. So there aren't very many comps to update that assessed value. Ag land, what is it, 66% over a 3-year period, somewhere around there. So it's calculated differently than homeowners. And then you have, recently, I have fire territories popping up like mushrooms in my district. And that sort of like undoes all of our efforts in controlling property tax growth. So in Mooresville, Brown Township is just one of them that's proposing fire territory, and that's going to increase homeowners' property taxes $300 to $400 a year. That is more than we could ever, give relief on. So we have to acknowledge local government does need to run, and their fixed costs are going up. We have to acknowledge where they can make cuts. I know they don't have maybe a lot of discretionary funding. We have local governments that are doing a great job and have been living next to the bone for a long time, and then we have local governments that are not. In insurance, this is just one of the costs they mention. And we, as an insurance agency, my real life until I retired the 1st of February, we do a lot of municipalities and school districts. This is just one example of what they have faced. 2017, this particular school district, their insurance cost was $282,000. We just handed them the renewal, $749,000 in 7 years. And that is a competitive bid. That is going out to different markets. There's only a few markets that write schools and municipalities. They have to pay this. It's triple what they paid 7 years ago. That's the same thing with their personnel, their utilities. So I'm sympathetic to the issues that they face, but they have to get some of the other things under control. The growth is really what we're trying to control. We're not going to be able to go back. I know the reset is a big deal, but the question has arisen that may run afoul of the Constitution and the St. John Court ruling saying that you have to use market value. You can't put 2025 market values back to 2022. It can't happen. It's not market value anymore. So that was, I'm really aware, and these are all of the information that I'm trying to consider when we're coming to a solution for this problem. So I'm not going to say here, we're going to do something, but these are some of the challenges that we face.
Okay, thank you very much. It is a little past the hour, and I know you held up your hand, Jody, so I'll give you one more. You'll be our last question this morning, so go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm Jody Madeira, a Monroe County Commissioner as of about 8 weeks ago. In my 2 months in office, in terms of legislative goings-on, it seems like someone is always around the next corner with a baseball bat. And that's on the state level and the federal level. And those baseball bats that hurt so much include freezes to federal funding programs that threaten social programs and quality of life measures in counties. Monroe County is like Hamilton County. We're a high-quality suburban county, and our ability to grow includes attracting people who bring and make this county what it is. It's not just, trying to provide a social safety net. IU has lost hundreds of millions of dollars in grant dollars thanks to federal activities. Is there any consideration in SB 1 being given to the fact that federal government cuts may be far deeper after the session ends than we suspect even now? The Department of Education is being wrapped up. That's going to foist additional costs that are unforeseen on our county, and we are going to be left holding the purse strings to God knows what catastrophes that are going to come down the pike. And we need to protect local government revenues because we do serve as a safety net for public employees and residents. So is there any considerations being given to what happens after the legislative session is over, and after the legislative bodies can no longer consider what's going on at the federal level, and how that's going to kneecap our counties?
I will respond to that. There are several conversations going on about, do we have a special session? And I know that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have already articulated in that same article that Jen Pearl referred to, which I would, if you haven't signed up for the Capitol Chronicle, I would encourage you to do so. They just cover state legislate, well, they cover more, but they really go down deep into covering state government issues and the legislation that's happening. Such a good piece of journalism sent to your inbox, so sign up for that. But in that, they asked the leaders of the Republicans in the House and the Senate if they would be open to having a special session should the more cuts come from the federal government. And at that time of print, they said, no, this is not something that we will prioritize. That would not be a sentiment felt by at least the Senate Democrat caucus. We recognize that as we sine die in April, we might need to come back into session as we get more information. We are faced with cuts that, I mean, I'm even reading now that perhaps we're entering a recession or in a recession. I mean, it is really important that we get this right as we can. So I would encourage all of you to apply some pressure to your state senators and legislators and say, if this should happen, please call a special session so we can address this and do right for those living in Indiana.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that question. And thank you all. Senator Yoder, Representative Mayfield, Representative Hall, Representative Heaton, thank you so much for coming this morning. I'll turn it over to Jill to close out.
Please grab one of these sheets in the back, and it has contact information on it. It also has overview of some legislation that will be of interest to you.
I want to express our gratitude and a huge thank you to our incredible panelists and our moderator for sharing their time and insights today. We also want to extend our appreciation to our presenting sponsor, Indiana University, for their generous support. Special thanks to our gold sponsors, Monroe County Farm Bureau, People's State Bank, Cook Medical, and Duke Energy for making this event possible. And of course, thank you to all of you for being here and engaging in these important conversations. Before you go, I want to mention that the League of Women Voters is hosting a legislative forum on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. via Zoom and CATS TV. And you can direct any questions to Christopher MG from the Bloomington Chamber. He's going to be moderating that. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.